Group interviews are similar in some ways to one-on-one interviews, but I really see them as a whole different animal. For example, the line of questioning is very similar. We're looking for others to do most of the talking, and so we continue to ask open-ended questions. The biggest difference, obviously, is that this is a group setting, and so that raises all kinds of challenges and opportunities, really. One of the more common challenges in a group setting, for example, is that some people prefer not to offer their input in front of the group. On the flip side, one of the opportunities is that people tend naturally to respond to what the other interviewees say. And so this kind of setting usually produces more of a natural and comfortable discussion. A full discussion of group interviewing is outside the scope of this course, but I'm going to give you several tips to help you make them successful. First, when you're planning your group interview, it's a really good idea to take a colleague with you. The idea is that you can lead the discussion and keep it on track. In other words, you are facilitating the discussion, while the other person is focused on taking notes. If you try to do it alone, one of two things often happens. Either you get too focused on notes, which take time to write down, and you lose control of the meeting, or you don't focus enough on notes and you end up missing important requirements. I always recommend taking a friend wherever possible. Also, during the planning for the meeting, you'll want to devise an agenda. Again, this doesn't have to be anything fancy. It could just be a series of categories or bullet points that you want to cover. However, and this isn't an art, you don't want to stick too strictly to the agenda. If the conversation is going in a productive direction, I say go with it. In person, face-to-face group discussions are much more effective than conference calls. So I'm going to strongly encourage you to actually meet face-to-face when collecting requirements from a group. This is primarily because you miss so much context and body language and facial expression when you're on the phone, but also because of the distraction factor. So reserve a conference room somewhere. All right, during the interview, you'll want to pose questions to the group, largely in the same style as in a one-on-one interview. Again, we want to ask broad, open-ended questions that lead us to the requirements that we need. So you might ask, how would you state the purpose of this project? What do you see the key features of the beverage sales tracking system being? Stuff like that. And when you ask those questions, it's important for your colleague who is taking notes to not only record the question and answer, but also who gave what answer and the why or the rationale behind that answer. If the people that you're interviewing don't happen to give you a rationale, it's your job to ask them why they made their statement. Sometimes the biggest challenge is keeping the group on track. It's common for groups to veer off on tangents, and sometimes these are valuable and you learn from the tangents. But sometimes it's going in an unproductive direction. It's then your job to say, okay, folks, this is a good discussion, but let's come back to the agenda, and then bring everyone back. Another challenge with group discussions is when some individuals just listen and they don't offer any input at all. Well, sometimes this makes sense. Maybe it's a person that's new to the organization or whatever, but most often it doesn't. Really try to get everyone to talk. One way to do this is to just direct a question to that individual. Another option is to repeat a point that another interviewee just made and then ask the quieter person what he or she has to add to that statement. So those are some tips on leading group interviews. Gosh, I'm really getting excited now about that forthcoming requirement solicitation course. And I hope that you guys all sign up for it. But this relatively quick discussion, this should position you well to start off on your interviewing career.